In its over 20 years of life, Call of Duty has seen a ton of change over time. Some of these changes were loved by many, and others were hated and made for miserable states of COD. I'm Ornery for NYSL, and today we're taking a look at the worst decisions in Call of Duty history. I'm not talking about your decision to peek the 1v6 and throw the game entirely. This is focusing on decisions made by developers or executives at Infinity Ward, Treyarch, Sledgehammer, Raven, or whoever it may be that were awful. Comment one thing you would change about Call of Duty today as we get started. Starting with Advanced Warfare and all the way up to Black Ops 4, we got a new unlock system that was entirely pay to win. The way it worked was you could unlock all the base guns throughout the game like normal as you would in any other Call of Duty, but they would add DLC guns throughout the game's lifespan that were only available through supply crates. That means in order to buy this new gun, which mind you, they were always at least pretty good, but for the most part were pretty much the defining meta, you had to get lucky in a supply crate and couldn't buy it outright with your own money. So that means in theory, sure, you could get these new guns from the supply crates in game if you were extremely lucky. This is because the crates you got in game were very limited, which means that there's no denying that you were much better off buying a ton of crates than hoping for the best. And this only got worse as time went on. Seriously, I think COD World War II had like 30 or 40 DLC guns in total, all only available through supply crates. Also, this ideology somehow snuck its way into Call of Duty 4 Remastered, which is just tragic. Aside from DLC guns, there were also weapon variants that you could land in these boxes, and these were sometimes just a better version of the gun you were already using, so that wasn't helping the pay-to-win accusations either. In the games prior to this system, you would get a new gun alongside whatever map pack was coming out at the time, which gave us legendary guns like the Peacekeeper. Sure, I guess you still had to pay for it, but you also got brand new maps to play alongside it. Also, you weren't paying for just a chance to get it, you knew what you were going to be getting up front. Seriously, the credit card is never getting nerfed. Alright, this next one is a lump of two niche modes in Call of Duty, and that's because I think they're both responsible in one way or another for taking away from their bigger brother game mode. Let's begin with Outbreak, which is an open world Call of Duty Zombies experience. Let me just rebuttal that statement with one question. Who was asking for this? Genuinely, I think the Call of Duty Zombies experience is unlike any other genre of game there is, and it does a great job of hitting that target audience simply because of the base format and round-based zombies is nearly perfect. So why change it? I'm not going to sit here and say that Outbreak was the worst thing ever, but it's definitely one of the worst zombies experience out there when compared to the traditional experience. And this for sure took resources away from the zombies we know and love. Also, pretty much everything I just said about Outbreak can also be said about Modern Warfare Zombies. Modern Warfare Zombies basically took Outbreak and DMZ and created yet another forgettable mode that only left us with one good thing, and that's another camo grind, which even hardcore camo grinders would agree it's just a chore. Other than that, these two modes can get lost. You know what's bad? When an entire game gets its own dedicated spot on this list. Modern Warfare 2 was a game that was seriously crafted against the entire Call of Duty community. It took everything that people loved about Modern Warfare 2019 and did the opposite of it. No movement, no one-shot snipers in Warzone, the guns now have weird names that don't actually exist in real life, perks don't activate till halfway through your match, there's even more complexity in the already overwhelming gunsmith, the unlock system isn't linear whatsoever, the worst interface in all of Call of Duty, which is also here to stay based off of Modern Warfare 3, and a knockoff Tarkov clone to go alongside with it. Seriously, we've had a lot of trial and error without Call of Duty, but Modern Warfare 2 was one of the most disrespectful entries to the franchise solely because of how the community was straight up just ignored and neglected. The supply crates we were talking about earlier would eventually evolve into the battle pass formula that we have now. Now we can all agree this is far superior than the supply crates, but still feels like it creates an excuse for lackluster updates to keep us hanging on to the game longer than we should. Games now ship with less maps with the promise to add more free maps in the future, whereas before we had a full set of stock maps with the promise of more optional maps in the future behind a paywall that also might bring some new guns alongside with it. Now each option had its flaws, but if the game is a full-fledged experience at launch that I'm satisfied with, I'm more than happy to throw some more money their way to continue to scratch that itch of an already good game. As far as the battle pass goes, it's not really pay to win by any means except for a few bugged blueprints. It just creates a system that favors the developer since free updates are always going to captivate the player even if they're lackluster. Thanks a lot, Fortnite. You knew this was going to be on here. Call of Duty has done a lot of experimenting, but the biggest change to core gameplay has been its movement throughout the years, and the X movement was definitely a low light for many. Giving the player a jetpack with radical movement options is something we touched on in our history of movement video and was without a doubt the biggest change we had seen in movement and was for the worse. This is the kind of thing that just doesn't belong in Call of Duty. It's like when they have third-person playlists. Sure, there may be a few people who enjoy it, but it's just not the way Call of Duty was supposed to be played. Having jetpacks and some type of LTM would be cool, but to create an entire game around it is just not the play. The two CODs that would follow would be Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare, which had the booster pack system, which was not as egregious as X movement, but still still not the movement us players wanted. Boots to the ground or die. Some may have enjoyed the Specialist in Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 4, but this is yet another element that just doesn't belong in COD. Not to be confused with the Specialist bonus that gives you all the perks in the game, the Specialists were characters you chose to use in game that gave you some sort of unique ability that would be on a cooldown. Things like gravity spikes, the Annihilator, War Machine, minigun, vision through walls, a free revive, and even teleportation, just to name a few. This was also not treated like a kill streak and just earned over time, meaning that every player could earn their ability no matter how bad they were. And since these abilities are pretty good, some even overpowered, you could find yourself getting killed by someone worse than you, which is just never fun. The Specialist, I feel like in some way, shape, or form kind of paved the road for the field upgrade, but the field upgrade is a much more tame version of this extra ability. I think if you were given the power to change one thing about COD today, it would be the matchmaking. Even somewhat recently, Activision made a comment about it and pretty much doubled down, saying that SBMM is not going anywhere. The skill-based matchmaking has plagued COD for years now, and it's an easy change that could bring back so many players. Instead of a completely randomized matchmaking system like we used to have, now every single lobby is just a total sweat fest that is extremely unenjoyable. This has now resulted in people taking desperate measures for getting bot lobbies with things like VPNs and two-boxing, which is just pathetic. Giving us the traditional matchmaking experience where anyone can play against anyone was part of the COD experience that we now are so far gone from. Hell, even Ranked has a hidden MMR that adds another layer of matchmaking above what rank you are, which defeats the entire purpose of a ranked mode. World War II is yet another controversial Call of Duty for the franchise, but the one objective gameplay element we can all agree on that was awful was the Division system. The Division basically put you in a box for what gun you could use and what perks you could use, if you even really want to call them perks. Basically, you choose a division that gave you an overlying ability like a suppressor for an SMG. Also, that was the only gun in the entire game that supported a suppressor. Then there would be new abilities unlocked through using that division, which gave you even more abilities. If that sounded confusing, that's because it is. The whole purpose of perks is to use and combine them in different ways to complement each other or kind of make like some off-meta builds, not to be tied to the same ones depending on what gun you were using. Thankfully, Sledgehammer reworked the entire system, but regardless, this was one of the worst reworks to creator class we have ever seen. Ever since the end of Warzone 1, the playlist for Warzone has been terrible, and it's only gotten worse with the amount of maps we have now. No matter what the playlist update, there's always going to be a map and squad size that will never line up. Trio specifically is super neglected for some reason. Every map with every squad size should always be playable. End of story. We all know that Warzone playlists are horrible, but the multiplayer side of things, we're also missing out on a ton of different game modes. Demolition is my all-time favorite game mode in Call of Duty, and they just now added it back with Season 4, which is great and all, but why not have it from the jump? I understand some of the more like niche game modes we've had in the past not being on here, but we don't even have Capture the Flag. I feel like that's one of the most popular game modes in any first-person shooter. So what's the pain in adding it? Worst case scenario is no one plays it, and then you remove it and move on. I just wish they would start getting a little more experimental with the game mode, since they have a ton in the vault that they're not using. But those are the worst decisions made in Call of Duty history. Comment what you think was the worst decision in Call of Duty history, and also if there's one that wasn't on this list, go ahead and mention it down below as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.